In medical school, I received only 40 minutes of education on nutrition. It was just one lecture where they taught us how to dose insulin for patients based on how much carbohydrates they eat. That's the only nutrition I got. This is how much, modern medicine thinks diet is relevant to people's health. It's difficult to say which one has been more damaging to our health, whether it is the vilification of the sun or the vilification of animal-based diets. Because this vilified meat, it was used by the seed oil industry to tell people stop eating butter, stop eating animal fat, stop eating tallow, and instead switch to vegetable seed oils. It's based on a huge industry lie that high cholesterol leads to heart disease, which is definitely a lie. Then number two is lowering your cholesterol levels will decrease your risk of heart disease. That's also a lie.
Do you mind if you can list just some simple foods that people like me, like I could go to the grocery store and get that are just healthy, that I can eat on a regular basis?
You can have ground beef in your freezer. You can have it for months in your freezer. Combine
Not
that
in
with
seed oil. Not in vegetable oil, though.
not in vegetable seed oils. And combine that with whatever fruit or vegetable you want. I think that's an ideal human diet, If you want some rice, that's also good. If you like potatoes and sweet potatoes, these are healthy carbohydrate options, if not done in excess. And I think basing the diet on that fixes 95% of health problems.
So before we started recording, we were talking about fertility a little bit. And my wife and I have been trying to have a baby for about 5 years now. How can someone adjust their diet, or how does diet affect things like fertility?
Pregnant and, mothers that want to get pregnant, they were put at a very high status in society, and they were usually given the best foods. And what the best foods are, the fattiest meats, organ meats. The worst culprit of this are blue LED bulbs. So living under fake LED light is a stressor to the body. What it does is that it raises cortisol, and when your cortisol is high, again, that's a state of stress on the body. It's at this point, trying to fight Bitcoin is trying to fight email in the 1980s. You might not like it, you might prefer using a fax machine, but it is the best technology of money out there.
Welcome to the Bitcoin broadcast. I'm your host, Vince. Today we have on Dr. Ammous, the brother of Saifedean Ammous. You're not just his brother, though. You are a doctor, and you've been very outspoken recently about a lot of controversial things that I don't think should be controversial. But it's been very refreshing to see doctors actually speak out and have these types of opinions. I appreciate it. How are you doing today?
Hi, Vince. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well.
Awesome. If you don't mind, do you mind giving just a little bit about your background, your medical degree, where you started, and then also how you got into Bitcoin?
Awesome. Yes. I'm an internal medicine physician. I work as a primary care doctor. I did my undergraduate studies in the U.S., and then I did my medical school in Lebanon, and then I came back to do residency here in New York, and then I currently work as a primary care physician here in Boston. And when I was in medical school, I sort of became very disillusioned with the medical system, because I realized that the point of the system is not to help people get better, but rather just to make as much money as possible selling them pills and procedures that they don't really need. And it was a very difficult time for me in my training. I've worked so hard to get into medical school to realize that we're not actually helping people get better. So it was a little bit difficult, but at the same time, I went and did my own research, and I learned the things that actually make people get better. And these things are lifestyle oriented. And so right now, my mission is to help people understand how broken the system is, and to help them get healthy the natural ways that I've learned about. And, being the brother of Saifedean Ammous, probably the best orange pillar out there. We actually lived together when I first started medical school. And that was the time when he got really deep into the Bitcoin rabbit hole. And that was the time when he started writing the Bitcoin standard. And it's funny, like at the same times that he was getting all these realizations about the financial system and how broken it is, I was understanding the medical system at the same time. And we would kind of come back at the end of the day and just compare notes and see how similar all these fiat systems are and how broken they are. And yeah, so that, and of course, we also understood that the way out is gonna be Bitcoin, and ever since we've been both passionate about that.
Yeah, I mean, being having a brother like that, it's kind of hard not to be orange pilled. When did he actually start writing that book, if you don't mind me asking? Sorry.
I think so. He published it in 2018, but he actually it took him. Sorry, no, he published it in 2015. I don't know the exact date, but yeah, I think it was 2015. Quote me
Okay.
if I'm
I was
wrong.
just, I was, yeah, I was just kind of seeing as like a reference of like how long you've been orange pilled because uh, going
Yeah,
through, I mean, as we know, Bitcoin has a million rabbit holes that you go down, and health and wellness and low time preference is a big one. um, and you want to take care of yourself, and you want to prolong gratification type thing, and I think that's a really big aspect. And so my slogan for this podcast is all conversations lead back to Bitcoin. And I think going down the health rabbit hole is, a big one for most people, especially right now, because it's been exposed about how corrupt and how absurd so much of the health system is. As you pointed out, it's so much for monetary gain. And I kind of wanted to start out with your pinned tweet because
yep,
I think it's fantastic. I think it's fantastic. I mean, you start out, you're like the biggest lies taught in medical school. And as we all know, the food pyramid just got shifted.
yep.
And can you talk about, I mean, the meat, just the food aspect of, the food pyramid and what you've learned and why you say things like meat causes colon cancer, why that's, false, seed oils, things like that. Can you talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so in medical school, I received only 40 minutes of education on nutrition. It was just one lecture where they taught us how to dose insulin for patients based on how much carbohydrates they eat. That's the only nutrition I got. This is how much, modern medicine thinks diet is relevant to people's health. So, at the same time, during medical school, I was doing my own dietary changes and I felt so much better about how I felt. And I started studying and reading about diet on my own, and I understood how healing diet is if done appropriately. The reason diet is not discussed in medical school is because there's no profit if you tell people to fix their diet. If a doctor sits with you for an hour and tells you, this is what you need to eat, this is what you need to stop eating, you get them better, and then they leave your clinic, and then you never have to see them again. But if you sell them medications, then they're forever customer. And unfortunately, also these medications come with a lot of side effects so that they keep coming back to you. So it's not good for business to fix people's diets and actually get them healthy. Most of nutritional research done in, big universities, in research laboratories, in Harvard, in Stanford, all that research, unfortunately, is very biased because it's heavily sponsored by processed food industry. So it's very difficult to understand what the ideal human diet is by just, opening PubMed and reading about, you know, uh, studies that were done in laboratory, etc. Good way to understand the ideal human diet is to look at what societies ate prior to the advent of industrialization and processed food. And a good reference in that regards is a dentist by the name of Weston Price. So Weston Price was a dentist in the early 1900s. And back then, there was a huge interest in vegan and vegetarian diets. People sort of started having this idea that a plant-based diet is probably the answer to all our ailments, and it's probably what humans originally ate before, we became industrialized. And so Weston Price took that idea and went traveling all over the world, looking at the diet of tribes that haven't been touched by industrialization. And he was hoping to see that, they're all very heavy on vegetables and they didn't eat meat, etc. But what he saw is that all these societies, without exception, the staple of their diet was animal meat and fat. No exception. Whatever grew around there in that environment was the staple of the diet, whether it was beef, whether it was lamb, whether it was fish, whether it was chicken, uh, whatever grew in the environment there. And on the side, they usually ate whatever grew there in season. So this is a very good starting point to understand what the ideal human diet is base it on meat and fat, have that with every meal, and then eat whatever grows locally in your environment.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've transitioned my own diet to primarily, I guess you could say carnivore to the most part, mainly eggs, mainly meat. Steak and eggs is pretty much my diet, mixed with, protein and fruit. What about another one that you mentioned, which is, the sun? We talk about skin cancer and sun and sunscreen, wearing sunglasses. And I've read that also correlates with diet. Can you touch on that for a second?
Yeah, 100%. So there's a huge propaganda campaign against the sun, and it's difficult to say which one has been more damaging to our health, whether it is the vilification of the sun or the vilification of animal-based diets. Both have been equally catastrophic to our health. There's a lot of propaganda against the sun because it helps sunscreen manufacturers, and it helps skin and eye doctors because this obsession with skin cancer and getting screened for skin cancer, it just created this entire industry in dermatology that's very profits a lot from this. What the studies actually show about the effects of the skin on of the sun on the skin is there are mainly two groups of skin cancers. There's melanoma and there's non-melanoma skin cancers. Melanoma are the ones that are dangerous, that tend to metastasize and people can die from them. More than 80% of cases of melanoma occur in areas that are not sun exposed. So the sun doesn't cause melanoma. And actually, people that get more sun exposure have been found to be less likely to die from melanoma if they get it. So it's not the sun that causes melanoma. The benign skin cancers like squamous cell and squamous cell carcinoma, the sun does increase your risk of them, but these are rarely lethal and rarely spread to other parts of the body. But you increase your risk of these cancers, but by avoiding the sun, you are disadvantaging your body in many other ways. You need the sun to make vitamin D. You need the sun to set your circadian rhythm. You need the sun to wake up and have the proper hormones in your body synthesized. And the sun is actually protective against the most lethal forms of cancer, such as breast, colon, and lung cancer. So we desperately need the sun, and the harms have been significantly exaggerated by evil forces. And the only thing I recommend to people is just don't get sunburned. If you get sunburned, yes, you're increasing your risk of getting skin conditions, but if you're safe in the way you're exposed to the sun, then it's definitely advantageous to your health.
Okay. So I know I've seen a study that showed a correlation between sunscreen and skin cancer. Do you think sunscreen, the chemicals in them, causes skin cancer?
So the chemicals in sunscreen, we know that they are endocrine disruptors, which mean they act on our hormonal system. And that has significant effects on your testosterone, your estrogen, your progesterone levels, which is very harmful to everything in the body, including reproductive health. That also theoretically can increase your risk of cancer. I mean, there are studies linking increased sunscreen with skin cancer. Whether that's correlation or causation, hard to say. But definitely, sunscreen is detrimental to your health.
But then, but being sunburnt obviously is terrible for your skin as well. It kind of fries your skin. So, what do you recommend? I mean, I live here in Florida. It's sunny, 300 days out of the year. It's amazing. And I'm in the sun all the time. I go for a walk outside without a shirt on, but you're moving. So, you're not, people I think sometimes misconstrue going for a walk in the sun versus sitting on the beach and kind of baking in the sun. And I don't think the whole sit on a chair for an hour and a half is like good for you, but going for, a 30-45 minute walk because you're moving, you're in and out of shade, that type of thing. Is that kind of the sun exposure you're talking about that's like good?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be wary of what your skin color is and where do you live. So not everyone can tolerate being, at noon on the equator if they depending on their skin tone. But having said that, even if you're very light skinned, you can get to the point where you can spend hours in the sun, even without movement, if you play it right. So several things affect this. Number one is your diet. So there's a lot of people online that talk about how they stopped getting sunburned after they stopped vegetable seed oils. And while there are no direct studies looking at that, we do know that vegetable seed oils replace the fatty acids in your cell membranes. And these cell membranes become more fragile and therefore more sensitive to heat and UV light. So there is a theoretical mechanism where seed oils can actually increase the risk of sunburn. So definitely fixing your diet will improve that. That's one. Number two is that you want to be smart in the way you expose yourself to the sun. And the way to do that is start by early morning sun exposure, which means as close to sunrise as possible. Because in that time, there's more of the healing red and infrared light and less of the strong UV light. So if you get used to just being in the sun at the red light, you start to develop your natural tan or melanin in your skin. You start with that early in the morning, and that the more tan you have, the more you're able to stay in the sun closer to noon. And so if you gradually build up your tolerance, your skin callus, you eventually will get to the point where you can spend a lot of time outside. That being said, if you look at societies that live in very sunny places, it's very rare to see people that are out and about, at exactly at noon outside, not in the shade, because the sun is pretty intense then. But most of the rest of the day, you can still enjoy your time out in the sun and you don't need sunscreen.
Okay. You did mention red light. Is red light therapy a good option? I've just recently learned about, red light therapy thanks to, people like Joe Rogan talks about it all the time. And, there's, I go to a gym and they have a red light therapy thing that you can stand in for like 12 minutes. Is red light therapy, in your opinion, a good thing?
Yeah, I mean, red light therapy is good. Most of the studies done on it have shown benefit in muscle recovery, in recovery from injuries, and also in certain skin conditions. Uh, the advantages of being out in the sun, especially close to sunrise on sunset, are much, much more than getting red light exposure. So if you live in a place like Florida where you can be out in the sun in the morning or towards sunset, it's far more beneficial than any red light therapy because the spectrum of red light you're getting from the sun includes several wavelengths that are all very beneficial to your body versus red light therapy only is usually one or two wavelengths. So red light therapy is helpful. It's also especially helpful for people who live in dark environments in the winter, but the sun is always better.
Okay. No, that's good to know. I love that. I guess I don't have to necessarily go sit in a 12-minute box of red light therapy because I can go outside here. So that's nice.
Exactly.
I wanted to get back to food though, because you did say food affects this as well with the seed oils. And I've been trying so hard to cut out seed oils and, trying to help my wife cut out seed oils. And it's so difficult. It's in everything almost, unless you're eating like pretty much, one ingredient foods. It gets tough to go into a grocery store and buy enough food for the week that doesn't have seed oils that, you know, will not go bad within a couple of days in a humid climate type thing. And then the cholesterol aspect of it, eating meat has been vilified of, you know, causing this high cholesterol. Can you kind of take me down that rabbit hole a little bit with seed oils and cholesterol pertaining to, you know, the diet that we should be eating versus, you know, what we've kind of been taught or what we've been fed our entire lives?
Yeah, very, very good question, and they're very intimately linked. So the 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 reason meat is vilified is probably because people were trying to push vegetable seed oils. And the way to understand this is in the 1950s, there was an increasing rate of cardiovascular disease and like heart attacks in people in the US. And all the researchers at that time were desperately trying to find out what's happening. At that time, there was definitely an increase in our intake of processed sugar and also our vegetable seed oils, which were not a thing before then. They were invented around then, and then they slowly started creeping into households. One researcher by the name of Ansel Keys did something called the 7-country study, where he plotted the risk of heart disease with countries' intake of saturated fat, which is animal fat. And he saw that the more saturated fat people ate, the higher the risk of heart disease in these 7 countries. This study was revolutionary. All the media jumped on it. All researchers started trying to prove that point, and it started the entire anti-cholesterol and anti-meat and anti-animal fat propaganda. People, finally we understand what's causing heart disease. Well, little did they know that Keys, and he later admitted this, that he eliminated certain studies that did not fit his model. So he eliminated certain countries that if he had plotted them on this graph, the results wouldn't have held. So he basically picked and chose the countries that would lead him to the studies, to the results that he wanted. But because this vilified meat, it was used by the seed oil industry to tell people, stop eating butter, stop eating animal fat, stop eating tallow, and instead switch to vegetable seed oils. Because vegetable seed oils have such a huge profit margin and that's what drove that. At the same time, when this was all happening, there was something called the Framingham study, which is where the origin of the cholesterol myth originated. Framingham is this small town in Massachusetts where people had very good health and lived long. So a lot of researchers were curious to try and see what's special about this population. So a lot of researchers went and studied them. Original data in the 1950s and 60s showed that people who had low cholesterol tended to have less risk of heart disease. And this again was jumped on by the entire industry and media that, cholesterol is the reason why people are getting more heart disease. And who also jumped on these studies was the statin or cholesterol medication industry that realized that this is a huge profit margin because statins were the first medication in history to be prescribed just based on a blood test, not based on if you have any medical conditions or any symptoms. And so the cholesterol medication industry jumped on these results and it made cholesterol the biggest villain. So there was a fight against cholesterol from the pharmaceutical industry and from the processed food industry. Later on, data from the 70s and 80s from the Framingham study showed that actually people that had lower cholesterol tended to not live that long. So all this benefit that they saw was just bogus. And so we've realized that actually cholesterol is not bad for you and animal fats are not bad for you. But because the industry continues to propagate this lie, we're still stuck at data from the 1950s.
Okay. Yeah, cholesterol, man, it bugs me so much because ever since I started eating carnivore, to get we get free money from my wife's work if we go in, get our blood test done every year, and they'll give you, you know, like $700 or whatever in your HSA. And so I do it, but I started eating carnivore, and I think it was LDL, because there's two types of cholesterol, correct? And your healthy cholesterol, it went up, and they were talking about how I need to eat more fish and more vegetables and, you know, take the yolk out of eggs and things like this. And but isn't cholesterol like amazing for your brain as well?
Cholesterol is an essential nutrient. It's uh, it has very important functions throughout the body. It helps regeneration. It helps immune function. It helps hormonal function. It's also very important for brain health because most of your brain is made out of fat. So if you are reducing your cholesterol levels, you're getting less of this regenerative cholesterol that's going to your brain. And that's why the cholesterol lowering medications, the statins, are so detrimental to human health because they block the synthesis of a very, very important compound, which is cholesterol in the body. And some of the side effects of this medication are pretty horrific, including muscle pain, including liver injury, including diabetes, including memory loss and dementia. So they are very, very toxic medications. And also the data that actually looking at having higher quote unquote bad cholesterol, which is LDL, bad cholesterol, having it high, that's not the reason why people get heart attacks. There's no really clear association between high LDL and higher risk of heart disease. And actually, people who have higher LDL tend to live longer. So the entire construct is just fiat and it's broken and it's a lie, but it's still propagated every day. And even in that's what I was taught in med school, all these lies.
Is there, based off your opinion and your professional opinion, is there a correlation between something like Alzheimer's and cholesterol? And I mean, I know diet has a lot to do with it. I was just thinking while you were talking about, you know, your brain function, and if cholesterol and, you know, eating red meat and fatties and stuff like that, you know, helps your brain. Have you seen any studies that kind of correlate? If, you know, you have a low cholesterol, you're more prone to those types of things?
Yeah, there are studies. I mean, I think I saw one study at least that there's a higher risk of dementia in people with lower cholesterol levels. So that's definitely known. Whether whether statin or cholesterol medications cause dementia, there's no studies linking that, and I think that's because the industry doesn't want to study that because it's too controversial. From my own personal experience, I've seen people's memory and awareness of what's happening around them get better the next day after I stopped their statin. Like it has such a that dramatic of an effect.
I also had, you kind of touched on it there for a second. I am not quite sure how statins work. Can you explain why do they prescribe a statin? Why is that such, like, it's massive. Everyone, like anyone that is somewhat overweight or, you know, has high cholesterol, they always give you that. What does it do and why do they give you that?
So again, it's based on a huge industry lie that high cholesterol leads to heart disease, which is definitely a lie. Then number two is lowering your cholesterol levels will decrease your risk of heart disease. That's also a lie. Statins work by they're actually fungal toxins. They were found as a product of the fungus makes, and that's how, you know, fungus attacks people and attacks cells by making this toxin. That's how they discovered it. They found that this toxin actually lowers fat levels in cells, and so they started studying it, and they found that it blocks this certain pathway in the cell. This pathway generates cholesterol, but also generates a lot of other important compounds for the body. So by blocking this pathway, you are blocking an essential nutrient, which is cholesterol, but you're also blocking a lot of other important compounds that your body needs. And that's why they have such a detrimental and overreaching effect on the entire body.
Okay. And then I wanted to ask you again about since we're on the topic of food still and seed oils, what types of food do you recommend for someone, um that you can eat on a daily basis. Something like simple that's not super expensive. Because we always see, celebrities like to post this kind of stuff. They're always on this like health kick, but they have like a chef. They have their own chef at home, and it's like, well, yeah, it's pretty easy when you have unlimited money. Do you mind if you can list just some simple foods that people like me, like I could go to the grocery store and get that are just like healthy that I can eat on a regular basis where it's not like don't eat too much of that, like kind of in that general. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes. I mean, so an important thing about going to the supermarket is you want to only shop in the peripheries of the supermarket. So you go in, you go to the vegetable and fruit section, and then you go to the meat section. That's all you need to do. Whatever's in the
What
middle
about the
is usual.
dairy?
Dairies, I don't know where it's usually at. It's usually in the periphery, but that's fine too.
Okay.
Okay? That's all you need. Everything in the middle is processed crap that you should not be eating. Okay? One good budget friendly food to eat is ground beef. You can have ground beef in your freezer. You can have it for months in your freezer. And whenever you need it, you just bring out one of those cubes and just heat it or fry it or bake it somehow. And it's delicious and available. Combine
Not
that
in
with
seed oil. not
not in
not in
seed oil,
vegetable oil though.
not in vegetable seed oils. And combine that with whatever fruit or vegetable you want. I think that's an ideal human diet. If you want some rice, that's also good. If you like potatoes and sweet potatoes, these are healthy carbohydrate options, if not done in excess. And I think basing the diet on that fixes 95% of health problems.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. And then, what about bacon? Bacon, for some reason, I don't like bacon. I don't eat bacon. I was raised Jewish. For some people that may not know, so growing up, we didn't eat pork, and so I can't stand a lot of pork and things. Is bacon healthy or not healthy? Because a lot of people on carnivore they eat it for breakfast, and I'm like, I can't do bacon.
Yeah, I mean, so the fight against bacon is because it's animal fat, but animal fat it's not wrong. It's not bad for you. The mainstream thinks it's bad for you, but it's not. You have to be careful about where you get your bacon from and what kind, because some of them are heavily processed and they have a lot of preservatives on them. So these ones I would avoid. But if you can get good quality bacon, then yeah, it's good for you.
Okay. And then this kind of leads me into, so before we started recording, we were talking about fertility a little bit. And my wife and I have been trying to have a baby for about 5 years now. And how how can someone adjust their diet, or how does diet affect things like fertility? Or could that be a cause why so many people my age, 35, are struggling with fertility? Elon Musk posts all the time about how fertility rates are dropping around the globe, and it's a big concern. And I know friends that have struggled with it, that have gone the IVF route. I know people that have had multiple miscarriages, like 2, 3, 4 miscarriages type things. I guess my first question about fertility is, how does diet affect fertility, and what can we do to potentially either reverse or help younger generations with this issue?
Very good question. And it's a very important topic that not enough people are talking about. If you look at traditional societies, they uh, pregnant and mothers that want to get pregnant, they were put at a very high status in society, and they were usually given the best foods. And what the best foods are: the fattiest meats, organ meats, nutritious foods like that. In order for the body to want to reproduce, it needs to feel that it's in a state of abundance. If your body thinks that you're in a starvation mode, it doesn't secrete all the important hormones that will make your body more fertile and more willing to have kids. So you need to put your body in a state of abundance. And probably the thing that's most lacking in people's diet is animal fats, butter, animal meat, steak, all these things. Most people are not getting enough of that to put their body in a state of abundance. Cholesterol is very important for making hormones for fertility. So that's very important. now that we have a lot of people in the carnivore and keto community, also being too low carb for people that want to get pregnant and are seeking fertility is also not great. You want to have some carbohydrates because, again, carbohydrates signify abundance for your body. So these are the two cornerstone of having enough saturated animal fat and having enough carbohydrates. So these are two things. Avoiding processed foods, because as I said, most processed foods have vegetable seed oils, which are inflammatory. And when your body is inflamed, it's thinking about putting out the fire rather than thinking about having kids. So that's something to think about. Uh, Another very, very important thing that not enough people talk about is what's causing our body to live in a constant state of stress or agitation is our exposure to artificial light. So if you live constantly under artificial light, the spectrum of this light didn't exist in nature up until, around 100 years ago. People lived under the full spectrum of the sun historically, and then at night they lived in darkness. It's only been recently that we are now living under artificial light 24/7. And the worst culprit of this are blue LED bulbs. So living under fake LED light is a stressor to the body. What it does is that it raises cortisol, and when your cortisol is high, again, that's a state of stress on the body, and your body is dedicating less energy to your fertility and your reproductive health. So being very conscious of your diet is important, but also being very conscious of your light environment is very important.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I mean the light thing is it's hard in today's day and age if you work in an office to avoid that. It's nice, if they have big windows and stuff, but you're pretty much always under those, fluorescent lights. That's really interesting.
There
What
are there are
about
tips to there are tips to kind of get around that if you work in an office all day. And the most important thing is you need to see the morning sunrise. Either sunrise or as close to sunrise as possible. You want to see the sun in the morning before you're exposed to artificial light. So that sets your metabolism for the rest of the day in a good way. And then if you're stuck in an office that's artificially lit, try and take frequent breaks where you go outside and stand in the sun. 2 or 3 times a day, even if it's just 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But that kind of keeps your circadian rhythm aligned with the sun and it makes you less affected by the fake light that you're living under.
Okay, I'm gonna tell my wife to go for more walks outside then during the day.
Definitely.
Um, and then another big question that I've seen, because we've been going down this fertility route for so long is, you end up doing a lot of research and looking up everything. In your opinion, does birth control seem to have a massive impact? Because most women get put on birth control these days when they're like 15, 16 years old, and they're on them until they're ready to try and have kids. So they can be on them from, 10 to 15 years sometimes. And then have you seen any correlation between birth control and fertility?
Definitely. I mean, it artificially disturbs your entire hormonal profile. And if you do that for years, then it's not easy for your hormones to get back to normal just the day you get off it. So it's definitely not great for fertility, and it also depletes a lot of nutrients in the body just because it changes your hormonal profile. Again, people that have been on the birth control pill, you need to get off it. But also the more of the healthy things that we're talking about, like sun exposure, like avoiding artificial light, like eating right, all these things will reset your metabolism and reset your hormonal profile. So it's not like you can't overcome the effects of the pill, but you have to work hard to.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's fascinating because as far as I'm concerned, birth control is also somewhat new, and they're always developing these like new types. And it's like, it's hard to find even studies on long-term effects of it because some of them are so new and you're like, how is this healthy? Like a woman isn't even going through a menstrual cycle at this point, but, we don't have to be two dudes talking about that. We'll we'll leave that alone. I did want to talk about, hopefully this part doesn't get the video shut down, but I kind of wanted to talk about, the jab or the vax. God forbid you say that nowadays. No, you pretty much could only say it on X without getting a red flag. Did you see that they are talking about going from like 72 for babies back down to, I think, 11
Yep.
or something like that? Did you see that?
Yep. Yes. I mean, that's a step in the right direction, but I think the correct number is zero. So,
Really? Okay.
yes, once we get to the point where zero vaxes are required for kids, I would be happy. Uh, this topic is controversial. I don't like to talk about it too much, but we have to put it out there. When I went into medical school, we do a pediatrics rotation, which is, you work with kids' health. And going into that rotation, I knew that there's vaccination schedule. I expected that, they're going to teach me everything about why these vaccines are needed, what studies are there to support them, etc. But I went into the pediatric rotation. I was taught none of that. I was just given the schedule and told, this is what you need to give to your patient. When they're 3 months, this is what you give them. When they're 6 months, this is what you give them. And because at that point I was already questioning a lot of things about medicine, because I wasn't seeing people getting better, I went down and examined what actually is behind all these vaccinations. And what you find is there's not really any data looking at comparing the rates of disease with this vaccine or without this vaccine. It's never tested. And there's also no long-term data on their safety. So most of these vaccines are tested for, 3 months, and then nobody ever links them to diseases that happen after that. So vaccination is a pretty controversial topic. I don't want to tell patients, no, I don't want to tell people don't vaccinate your kids, but I definitely want to tell people you need to do your own research and don't just blindly listen to what your pediatrician says.
Okay, that's fair. I think it's very smart for people to question, medical procedures and what they're giving, especially to a baby who's 2 days old and they come in with like 15 needles. And I'm like, wait a minute, can't we let this baby develop? And maybe, they have their own immune system. Why don't we give that a chance before we start injecting all of these things? And, I'm not a doctor, so like it's so controversial right now because it's, you have RFK in there saying we need to lower the vaccines, and then you have doctors saying, well, no, we need to be doing all these vaccines, and then you have the CDC saying, well, maybe not all of them are good. And so it's such a gray area right now, and I feel bad for parents because I mean, it's like, which ones do you get, which ones do you not get? You don't want to be the asshole of the school because your kid is the unvaccinated kid. And it's such a tough spot for people right now. I feel bad for, so many parents.
It's hard, but it's better than how it was 10 years ago where nobody was talking about this and people were just
Very true.
blindly giving their kids 72 shots. So, yeah, we're moving in the right direction, but it's still difficult and people need to do their own research.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we don't have to talk too much about that then. I appreciate you touching on it though for me. Um, and then, so basically, everything we've talked about so far has been because of money, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, everything that you've brought up, the root cause is the money, correct?
Correct. I mean, in the case of medicine specifically, it's actually pretty easy to identify what the origin of all of this was. And the reason why we are in the mess that we're in right now, where we're so heavy on pharmaceutical medicine, is in 1903, the American Medical Association was formed. The goal of American Medical Association was to kind of standardize medical care across the US, which sounds great on paper. At that point, going to a doctor didn't have the same meaning as going to a doctor now, because there were several kinds of doctors. There were naturopaths, there were homeopaths, there was chiropractors, osteopaths. So you kind of picked and chose what kind of physician you wanted to go to, or you could go to the, traditional pharmaceutical doctor, which was called allopathic medicine. So that was the case in the early 1900s. And then the American Medical Association hired someone called Abraham Flexner to write a report which was called the Flexner Report. And the goal of the report was to standardize medical education across the US. Sounds great on paper, we want to make sure that medical schools are up to a certain standard. But what the Flexner Report actually did was to shut down any medical school that did not teach pharmaceutical-based medicine. So all of a sudden, med schools were only allowed to teach, pills and surgeries, and all sorts of alternative ways of looking at the body were shut down. And this started in the early 1900s, and ever since, the definition of medicine has just been one sort of medicine. And people would argue that, okay, maybe it's because allopathic medicine is better than all these other schools of medicine. Maybe, but if that's the case, then why do you need to suppress the other schools of medicine? And the ability of government to do that is only enabled by their ability to print unlimited amounts of money, only enabled by fiat. And it's no coincidence that all of this happened right around the same time that the Federal Reserve was formed, because that was what allowed government to become so big and so influential and able to intervene in all aspects of our lives.
Okay. I mean, we all know that, the United States is one of the only places where you can, I think it's us in New Zealand, that can have commercials for, pharmaceuticals. And I'm pretty sure like even Coca-Cola was like massive in pushing a lot of these ideas. And now the pharmaceutical industry is so big in America and no one will talk about it because the money. Like a news station isn't going to talk bad about pharmaceuticals because that's like 50% of their revenue. The big food companies, they don't want to talk about it because God forbid you stop eating processed food and you get healthy because that's their sales. So my question, how does Bitcoin fix this?
Yeah, I mean, it's important for people to note that it's not as liberals want to point out that it's a failure of the free market that all these pharmaceutical companies have so much money and that allows them to, buy out all the politicians and buy out all the media. Well, the pharmaceutical industry has all that money and power because it was given to it by the government. Government suppressed all alternative forms of medicine. Government gave pharmaceutical industry patents, which gives them so much money for compounds that, for based on intellectual property. So the pharmaceutical monster that is in control of so much of our lives right now was only enabled by government. It's not a product of the free market. And same with the processed food industry. It was enabled by the government and big agriculture and subsidies to large farms, etc. So it's not a failure of the free market. If it was a free market, then other people would be allowed into this industry, which is it's not the case. So the reason Bitcoin fixes this is because governments will no longer have the ability to just print money out of nowhere and get away with propagating whatever message they want. Any money that any project has to be funded by people's own Bitcoin. You can't print Bitcoin out of nowhere. And so any sort of economic decision has to be based in the free market, not based on fiat.
Do you think that Bitcoin is the only solution for something like this? Unless the United States gets back on some sort of gold standard. I mean, I don't see a potential, solution that's easy or that we could implement at this point in time. How do you think, the United States could even move forward with this?
Yeah, I mean, there's no the only way to not move ahead into a Bitcoin standard if they go to another sort of hard money standard. Maybe they go onto a gold standard. But the world, it started with El Salvador, but all countries are going to realize that you're going to do a lot better if you are on a hard money standard. And it's going to eventually go on from one country to another until the entire world realizes that the fiat dollar is the largest scam in human history.
Yeah, it really is. It's amazing. Um, and I think Bitcoin could solve so many of these issues. Do you see something like the United States being able to transition from something like the United States dollar to a Bitcoin standard? And how do you see that playing out?
I'm not really a politician. Maybe I'll ask my brother and get back to you. But I mean, it's at this point, trying to avoid to fight Bitcoin is trying to fight email in the 1980s. It's you might not like it, you might prefer using a fax machine, but it is the best technology of money out there, and so you have to pick wisely.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's fair enough. Um, well, Dr. Moose, I really do appreciate you doing this. Is there anything that you wanted to share or, spread the word about anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, as you go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and as you're getting orange pilled, it's easy to kind of when you start reading about the health stuff, it's easy to get sort of black pilled about how toxic the world out there and how many things out there are trying to make us unhealthy, etc. But again, I mean, getting back healthy, getting back on the correct path is not difficult. You just have to eat right. You have to reconnect with nature, reconnect with the sun. It's always easy to get yourself back into a healthy state. And people, the baseline is so unhealthy that even doing a small few things can make you a lot more healthy than the average population. So don't feel overwhelmed. Don't feel black pilled. There's ways out of this.
I love ending with some optimism. Definitely I mean, are you pretty optimistic for the future right now? Because every time you turn on the news or go on X, everything's always doom and gloom. Are you pretty optimistic for the future?
I am optimistic for the future. I don't know if it's our future or our kids or our grandkids, but we are definitely going through some dark times right now. When will the light at the end of the tunnel come? When is the sun coming back up? We'll see.
Okay. Well, I mean, we do what we can. I mean, we try and spread. I know we didn't talk about Bitcoin too much. I get to talk to Bitcoiners all the time, and I don't get to talk to doctors all the time. So sorry, I kind of focused on a lot of the things that I just have on my mind that I wanted to take advantage of talking to you with. But I do like to ask, a couple fun questions at the end of my podcast. So far, what are your thoughts about the Bitcoin price right now? Looking back at 2025 and looking forward into 2026, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I check the Bitcoin price around maybe like once or twice a year. That's how I just, that's how relevant the price is for me. I just keep buying and I put it in cold storage, and that's what I do. So I'm the wrong person to ask about these things.
Okay.
And
That's perfect.
for me personally, that's what I recommend people do. If
Yes.
you just put it in there and just stop checking the price. So
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, buy Bitcoin, don't check the price, come back in 10 years and you'll be happy. Seems to be a good trend and it seems to be working out for most people. Where can people find you on the internet?
yeah, so I am at Ammous MD on X and on Instagram. I also have my website ammousmd.com where I offer a free newsletter, and I also offer consultations online.
What kind of consultations do you do?
People who have general health questions, specific conditions that they want a treatment on, they want an advice of, someone who understands the medical system but hopes to treat people in a natural way. So that's what I do.
Okay, awesome. No, thank you so much. I just thought of one more question I got to ask you. How is it being Safe Dean's brother?
It's pretty cool. I mean, so Saifuddin was a celebrity even before he was a celebrity. I'd walk down the street and people would be like, "Are you Saifuddin's brother?" So I've always been Saifuddin's brother, even before he had a Twitter account. Even it's pretty cool. Now it's become. It used to be just in my village and in my hometown. Now it's global. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, you guys are great guys. I've never actually talked to your brother. Hopefully I'll meet him at some Bitcoin conference or something, but he's done great work. You're doing great work. I really appreciate you coming on and, sharing some of your truths that you've learned. And I think people are really going to like this episode because this is something that I think a lot of Bitcoiners talk about and a lot of people are questioning right now. It's a big thing. So I really appreciate you being open, honest, and willing to share these types of things. I'll put all the links to your socials and your website in the description below. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Vince. Thank you for having me.
All right. Please like this video. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not. Please share it with someone. Share this video with someone who might be thinking about trying to get healthier. It's a big rabbit hole, and share this with them. And thank you guys so much for listening to the Bitcoin broadcast. I'm your host, Vince, and we will catch you next time.